Hello, everyone. This is Jimmy Colders back again with another logic video. Today, we're covering how to create 2.5D movement, and I guess the camera too. I'm gonna go into it real quick. Everything we're going to need. First thing we're going to need is a camera. Stamp out a basic shape. Use grid snap. Once it's stamped out, make it invisible and non-collidable. Reduce the detail since it's not going to be visible. Put a microchip on the surface using L1 and X. That's how you adhere to the surface. Open it with L1 and X. And stamp out a zone set to detect a tag. The tag label will be hide. And the zone will stretch out in front of the camera like so. And what this is going to be used for is to interact with the environment and make things in front of you disappear. I have this piece of material right here with a microchip stuck on it, and there's a tag in the center called hide, connected to an action recorder that if you press L1 and square and go in here, I merely make it invisible and you pass behind it. I'll demonstrate real quick what this looks like. Just to hide scenery elements. And then stamp a teleporter inside our camera chip. And it follows a tag called cam. Do not turn on match target orientation. Stamp out a camera, set it to cut. And you can go ahead and if you're pressing X on here, you can grab the camera and set the distance and orientation to whatever you would like. There's also this collision chip, but we're going to have to get to that later because it won't make a lot of sense unless we cover it in that order. Another thing I'd like to mention is we have invisible walls here to prevent our character from going over the edge or changing layers, but I'll get more into that later. I'm going to make some of the scenery invisible real quick. Oh. Let's make this not show up, just to show you what I'm talking about. I've got this rig here. It's a sculpt, 3 layers, representing 3 layers. It's invisible and non-collidable, similar to the camera sculpt. And I copied the camera sculpt box and put it on here. And basically grouped it, like so. Pressed X and grouped it with this layer indicator. And inside the chip, which I call spot, might make it a flag symbol, that's probably a little bit better. There's this tag called layer spot. And basically that's going to act as the position that the player occupies. It moves to 3 positions. And it's in the middle of the layer, not on the edge. I'm doing it similar to LittleBigPlanet's layer orientation. So there's 3 layers. You could potentially have more layers, it'd just be a little bit more drawn out. I probably should get into the logic that's inside our puppet here. So L1 and X will allow you to scope in and open up his logic. Inside his logic, I have stamped out a chip called 2.5D, and this is basically all the logic that's necessary. 1, you will need a follower, set to follow a tag called layer spot, which you may recognize from our little fellow here. I have set it to 100% strength, 79% overall dampening, and 12% speed. I've also gone into the secondary strength and dampening settings, and I've turned X and Y strength to 0, so that he only maintains the orientation on the Z-axis, which basically, if you don't know, Z-axis is like this. I guess you would call it forward and backward, maybe? I don't know. Depends on your perspective. I also turned down the dampening for X and Y so that they won't interfere with his movement when he's jumping. And I've set the max distance on as high as possible, although it probably doesn't matter. He'll be just fine at reorienting to it. Another thing I've done is stamped out a tag called Cam, which basically just acts as something for our camera block to follow. The teleporter that we put out earlier also follows this tag called Cam. So, you know, that's what that's for. And I've got this, which is our leap feature. I guess you could also call it change layer. I'll go ahead and open it up. Now I made it so that you can change layers with the D-pad, which I'll get into that real quick. First, I put out 2 nodes, which I've labeled up and down on the D-pad. And if we open up our controller sensor, which is in controller logic, just L1 and square to open up its tweak menu. You'll see in here the prompts for up and down on the D-pad are connected. I've also taken left stick local and connected it to a node in here, but we'll get to that a little bit later. And I've connected both nodes to a single node with a NOT gate connected to its power. If you want to open it up and stick this in the power, it's that easy. Just L1 and square, yoink with X, and put it in there. And I've connected the node to a timeline set to play once called Leap Layer. Could call it Change Layer though, because that's what it does. I've also put a switch on the timeline and connected it to the NOT gate's input to prevent playback. So when we change a layer, we won't instantly change to a new one, and it'll be a little bit more comprehensible to the player. They won't be hopping between layers so fast that they don't know what hit them. I've also put this little action recorder, which I have set to keyframe mode. And all it does is turn off the puppet interface, meaning that we won't be able to move either up or down, left or right, or jump during a layer transition. I've also connected this other action recorder on here, also set to keyframe mode, and all it does is turn off the procedural animations, which I have connected a switch to them. Just press L1 and square, and you can see the procedural animations in here. You have to be scoped outside the puppet, though, if you want to get access to this menu. But there they are. That's all I'm doing with that, is shutting those off. And I'm also shutting off both the jump animation and poses. I put them in a single chip to save on wires. I'm just shutting off the chip. And I think that's pretty much everything that this particular one does. Yeah, that's what it does. I've also got a little action recorder animation here, which you can see, set to keyframe mode. It's just a simple little shuffle. Kind of works in any direction. And that's everything that's inside our layer changer. Now I should get on to how I prevent you from, you know, like say you reach the maximum number of layers. Like you want to go up. And normally, because I'm using a timeline to select these, which I probably should show you, shut some of these things to make it less confusing. But normally I'm using a selector, I should say. But the selector is connected to 3 chips, which basically have these little animations inside. And the animations, all they do is move this block. Like so. to every position on the layer changer. Make sure you're using precise move and have the proper orientation. But I've got these animations for all 3 sections, 1, 2, and 3. That's the 3rd layer in back, and the front layer is 1. And I've got this little D-pad node set up here, similar to the other one. The difference is this controller sensor is set to wireless. And it goes into these 2 nodes that basically change the orientation to up and down. I've also connected these wireless receivers set to detect a signal called up, and that's how we move up or further back in the layers. And we've got another one called down, which moves further down in the layers. I've also set it to in scene so it can detect the signal anywhere at any time. Now, you may have noticed that we don't really have any signal receivers in this particular logic setup. That's because I have this inside my stick logic. And I'm going to get to that in a little bit. I think we might as well cover everything that's in our layer changer. First off, we've got these chips, which I talked about earlier, but they have a little thing inside, trigger zone, and it detects a tag called can't move up. It's set to in scene, and on the bottom we have can't move down, also set to in scene. And basically this means that when we reach the maximum number of movements, it'll prevent us from going too far back or too far forward or accidentally looping the selector over again. And I better show where those connect to, I suppose. Let's take a look. This is basically them. Can't move up. This also shuts off these specific nodes that control your movement ability so that, you know, they're off when you're too close to a wall, you know, when you're too close to the back or front. So like when you're all the way back, this thing will be active, which will make it so that you can't move any further back. And vice versa, same with the other one. And these wireless receivers, all they do is shut off the nodes at the appropriate time, unable to move down, unable to move forward. These actually interact with a different piece of logic in here, our collision logic. I've set it to the camera so that it'll be nice and stable and won't change orientation with the player. Like, it'll change how high and how low and right and left, but it won't go, you know, all wonky or turn around 180 degrees and mess up the orientation of our trigger zones. And basically these are little trigger zones set to detect labels. And labels are basically what objects are. If you scope into an object and press L1 and square, you'll see that it's got this label that you can turn on called scenery. And these things detect scenery. Both invisible and non-collidable scenery. Which is what these invisible walls are for. They're not collidable or visible, but they are scenery. And what happens is when they detect this thing, I've set one on the right, which will prevent you from moving in, and I've set one to the left, which will prevent you from moving outward in the layers or forward closer to the camera. And I've connected them to the signal to receiver input. Unable to up and unable to down. And basically the way this works is, what if you want to change layers but there's something in the way? Normally, if you press down, you'd move right into the wall and glitch out, probably. But basically I want to make it so that if there's something preventing layer changes, these receivers will prevent that from happening. And turn off the appropriate input. which in this case is up on the D-pad if you encounter a wall behind you, which there is actually a wall back there if I unhide it. So up on the D-pad, you're not moving in if there's a wall there, because this thing is detecting it right here. And normally this camera is at the center of the player, so if it seems wonky to have it out in front, it's not normally like that. That's pretty much how that works. And that's like D-pad movement, which the D-pad works for this, okay? I guess it's pretty reliable, although it's a little weird. If you're someone who's used to LBP, you might want the D-pad free, as it normally controls the menus in LBP, I believe. I haven't played LBP in a long time, although for you fans who are disappointed that Dreams came out and it wasn't LBP4, maybe this system would help you recreate LBP in Dreams. But the D-pad, as I was saying, is not the greatest choice I would pick for changing layers. It works, I suppose, but just in case you want something more traditional, more like LBP, I've got this stick layout, which basically is a chip and another chip inside of it. I had to do that in case I wanted to turn off the chip, you see. Well, let's get into all the rigmarole we've got going on here. First, we've got the left stick local, and it's important that it's local and not just left stick. It's connected to a node, which is connected to a splitter, which is connected to another splitter. This splits up the up and down output to positive and negative, which, for your information, goes into two other splitters. We're only using their positive values, and this basically means up and down, respectively. Positive up, positive down. And we've connected them to two signal manipulators, which I have set to pulse on, input on. Nothing else has really been messed with, so, you know, handy dandy. I've also taken the liberty of copying both these and using them here. And the advantage is that they'll have the native animations intact for preventing you to change layers, so convenient, you won't have to do that all over again. And I've connected the wires crosswise to fit the orientation of the character. It's something that's a bit difficult to explain why you cross the wires instead of just, you know, wouldn't it be more intuitive to do this? It's like it doesn't really work. Input-wise, when you actually play it, it feels wrong. It's like pushing up to go back. You know, it's weird. But yeah, crossing the wires is the best way. And on both sides, I've got these little timelines. One is leap layer down, and the other is leap layer up. And they both got NOT gates connected to their nodes, and they have a switch preventing playback. So they're basically like this thing, just copied. The difference is that there's two of them for which layer you're changing. You can't have a unified timeline if you're using the stick, and I'll explain why. I did use the same animation in both that I used in this one, so I just copied that. I also used the same move off and the same animations off in both of them, so if you wanted to use those, just grab onto them with X and press L1 and R2 to copy them over. The main thing that's different is actually the signal. I think it's a signal transmitter. Let's take a look. Yes, wireless transmitter. That's the main thing that's different. I've put it around here. It can basically be anywhere, because if you recall, we have them set to in scene, these little things here that change the layers, or change the layer thing, you know, the indicator, I should say. But they're set to in scene, so it really doesn't matter where the location of these transceivers is. But if you wanted to, you could move it. Like if you wanted to be in the center, you can do that. And one is called up for our up movement, and one is called down for our down movement. You also want to make sure that you connect the switch to signal to receiver, otherwise they won't work properly. So go ahead and do that. But yeah, let's go ahead and test it out and see how it all works. I'm using the stick currently to change layers. You can even do it while jumping if you wanted to back through the layers a bit. And you'll notice there's a gap here, which I normally would be able to phase through, but because there's an invisible wall set to scenery, non-collidable though, so it won't interfere with your, collision and other things. It will just interfere with your ability to change layers. But if it was removed, you could hop right through the scenery, which I will demonstrate. Which is, nutty. Wouldn't want that in there. Now there is something I should mention concerning when you respawn. You may notice that if I go back to layer 3, that's not right, Spawning weirdly like that back there instead of here where the checkpoint is. Not ideal. But I think what I would do is just have a system, if you go into your controller sensor, there is a is dead output. There is also the fell out of scene output. Although I don't think I'd have that one hooked up because that destroys you. But the fell out of scene output, what you could do is connect it to a wireless, not a wireless, a timeline set to play once, and you could have it so that it resets this to the A position. Honestly, it's something that could get fairly complex if you had multiple layers. I would probably make it so that it could be customizable, like whatever checkpoint you happen to be at, it'll reset to that. Let's go ahead and die. Actually, that was kind of weird. It's probably too high up. Let's move it down. There we go. But the system for that might be too complex to cover in this video, but basically, just be aware that you're going to have to come up with a checkpoint system that reorients your layer when you die. Just so you know. But yeah, I think that's pretty much everything. Oh, wait a minute. One little itty-bitty thing. I have this inside the jump animation. I took the jumped output, which you can access by just pressing L1 and square to open this little tweak menu. The jump output from our puppet interface I connected to a timeline called jumped. And I put a switch in here. And I think what this was meant to do is to prevent changing layers during jumping if you want to do that. Like if you want to just jump and have it so you're unable to change layers. I believe what this would do is turn that off. I don't really know, but it's not that important. Just a little thing at the end, I guess. Anyway, that's how to do the entire system of 2.5D. Now, this is only one methodology, of course. There's probably other ones. And there's other games that use 2.5D, like I think in the Pac-Man games you can actually, go around in circular formations. It's not just to a single two-dimensional plane, like you can go around a round pathway, and the camera will actually point toward the center of, and orient itself based off your trajectory, which is a little bit more different from this system, but nevertheless, it's a pretty good way to do it, I'd say. Also fairly thermo-effective. There's not too much going on inside this chip, and it could be easily put onto another puppet if you wanted to reproduce the system. Anyway, hopefully you found that helpful. Thanks for watching. If you have any thoughts, leave a comment, and if you enjoyed the video, leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the notification bell so you don't miss future videos. That's all for now. Goodbye.